The Buddha argued against fate. As you're sitting here with your eyes closed, there are many things you could be thinking about. You could be thinking about the breath. You could be thinking about events today, events tomorrow. You have lots of choices. There are lots of potentials here in the present moment. So try to choose the best potential and stick with it, like getting the mind to settle down with the breath. Explore the way the breathing feels in the body and take an interest in this energy flow that keeps you alive, that allows you to be aware of the body, allows you to move the body. Try to make it a good place to stay. You have that choice. You just have to work at your skills to do this well. The issue of free will in Buddhism is never one of absolute free will. The more skills you have, the more freedom you have. So we're working on developing the skills that we can bring to the present moment. This is an essential part of the teaching. The Buddha wasn't the sort of person to go out and pick fights with other people, to get into arguments. Usually, it was other people who brought arguments to him. But there was one teaching that he would always take exception to, and that was that we don't have any power in the present moment. There were people who taught that everything you experience right now is the result of some past action, or the result of the will of a creator God, or was totally random. You weren't at all responsible for your present experience right now. The Buddha would actually go and seek those people out and argue with them. He took the issue that seriously. He told them that if you believe that, then there's no path of practice. People kill, steal, have illicit sex, lie because of things that are totally beyond their control. And if you believe that, he said, it makes the path impossible. If you teach that, you're leaving people bewildered as they have urges coming up in the mind, and they have no basis for even believing that they can choose which train of thought to follow, which ideas to follow, which ones to say yes to, which ones to say no to. When you have no basis for making those kinds of decisions, you're left defenseless. You're left suffering. It's because of this that I'm always amazed at people who say the Buddha doesn't teach free will, that he teaches that everything is determined, because he was so opposed to that view. The other thing that I find amazing is that some people say it's such great news to know that they have no free will. You wonder what kind of mind would think that, a mind that doesn't want to be responsible. It's a very depressive thought. If you lack a lack of agency, lack a sense of being able to decide what to do and actually carry through with it and have an impact on your surroundings, you're pretty miserable. It's one of the definitions of depression. There's a famous case in American history concerning William James, the American philosopher. When he was young, he wanted to be an artist. His father put every obstacle in his way, and he finally gave up. And as he gave up, he started thinking about the issue. Does anybody have any free will at all? He went into severe depression. What got him out of the depression was a book by a French philosopher whose name I can't remember, a follower of Kant, who said the fact that we can choose our thoughts is a sign that we do have free will. So James decided that his first act of free will would be to believe in free will. Eventually, based on that, he was able to get himself out of his depression. As the Buddha pointed out, our past actions do have an influence on what we're going to experience right now, but they're not the whole story. If you can bring certain skills to the present moment, you can take the results of past bad actions that are sprouting right now and learn how not to suffer from them. This is an important ability. This is why we're able to practice. And this is one of the reasons why we want to practice, so that we can learn those skills. The more skills we have, the more freedom we have. He listed 5 skills altogether. One is to make the mind unlimited. By that, he meant developing the attitudes of the Brahma Viharas, limitless goodwill for all beings, limitless compassion for those who are suffering, limitless empathetic joy for those who are happy, and limitless equanimity in cases where you can't make any difference. These attitudes enlarge the mind. The next 2 skills are that you train yourself in virtue and train yourself in discernment, your ability to see what's going on in the mind, what choices you're making, which ones are skillful, which ones are not. The final 2 skills are the ability not to let the mind be overcome by pain and not to let the mind be overcome by pleasure. These 2 skills we learn as we practice concentration. When you sit down to meditate, one of the issues that immediately comes up is that there's a pain in your knee, a pain in your back, or a pain in your hip, and you need the skills not to be overcome by those pains in order to get the mind to settle down. The first order of business is to find a part of the body that you can make comfortable by the way you breathe and learn how to maximize that comfort. If the pain is going to have your hip, let it have your hip. You've got other parts of the body that you can focus on. It's like that old book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, where the instructor recommends that, when drawing a face, you don't draw eyes or nose or mouth. Draw the spaces between the eyes and the nose, between the nose and the mouth, between the mouth and the lower part of the chin. In other words, look at the areas you don't ordinarily look at. See them afresh. You find you can draw a much more realistic-looking face. In the same way, here you're focusing on the parts of the body that are not immediately calling for your attention, but you can make them comfortable. Then you can think of that sense of comfort spreading through the area that has pain. Say there's a pain in your knee. You let the comfortable breath energy go down the leg, through the knee, down through the ankle, out through the toes, out into the air. In other words, don't let the flow of breath energy get blocked by the pain. There is that tendency that we try sometimes to breathe only in areas that are not pained, and so the pains restrict what we can do, restrict where we can breathe. So think of the breath penetrating them. Remind yourself that the breath is energy, and energy can penetrate every atom there is. Remind yourself also that the breath comes prior to the pain. It was there first, so the pain doesn't have to restrict it. This leads you into the next step. You can ask yourself about the perceptions you have around the pain. Focus on the actual sensation itself and ask yourself, is it the same thing as the body part that it's in? Is it a solid block of pain, or is it moments of pain? If you can see it's moments of pain, then you can ask yourself, are these moments coming at you, or are they going away? This is an exercise both in concentration and in discernment. And the fact that you're taking a more proactive approach to the pain means you're not running away from it. You're not being victimized by it. It's going to hurt you less, and you're going to come to understand the relationship of sensations of the body to the sensations of pain, and see that they really are separate. Sometimes this analysis will actually make the pain go away. Other times it won't. But because there's a sense that things are separate, you don't have to feel oppressed by the pain. This is one of the skills with which you can deal with the results of past bad actions and not feel overcome by them because you're not overcome by pain. But it's also important that you learn how not to be overcome by pleasure. Because if you start wallowing in pleasure, you're opening yourself up to wallowing in the pains that come following on pleasure. Here too, concentration helps. You work with the breath, you make the breath comfortable, but you have to make sure that you not get distracted by the comfort. The comfort is there, but you maintain your focus on the breath. Work with the breath energies throughout the body. Try to develop a full body awareness from the top of the head down to the tips of the toes, the tips of the fingers, everything, all at once, and learn how to stay right there. Try to forget about the books you've read saying that you shouldn't get stuck on concentration, or that concentration is a dead end. It's not a dead end. It's part of the path. And forget the books that tell you you have to move on fast to insight. The Buddha basically says, learn how to settle in. Be at home here. After all, he calls this vihara dhamma, a dwelling place for the mind. When you get a home, you don't just run into the house and then run out. You go into the house, you decorate it, you make it a home, and then you can stay there. You can rest. As you stay there, you start learning things about the mind in which you're dwelling that you didn't see before, which is why concentration is the basis for discernment. So hold on to the breath and allow the comfort to do its work in the body. Then it will grow more and more calm, more and more calm. As you do this, you're also working on the skill of not letting your mind get overcome by pleasure, which is one of the skills that help to protect you from the results of past bad actions, that help to minimize them. These are also the skills that work to release you totally from this whole mass of samsara, this whole mass of karma. After all, the Buddha said the path we're following is the path of actions that leads to the end of action, a path of karma that leads to the end of karma. So these skills we're developing here help us in a lot of ways. What they basically come down to is, whatever your past, you can be here in the present moment and not suffer over whatever comes up. Thoughts that appear in the mind, pains that appear in the body, things that happen outside. You've got the skills that allow you to be more and more free in the present moment. Think of the Buddha's teachings on dependent co-arising. When he talks about the results of past actions that come at sensory contact, that's about halfway through the process of dependent co-arising. The factors that come before contact are the ones we work on as we meditate. The perceptions, the skills that allow us to be with pain but not suffer from the pain. Be with pleasure and not be overwhelmed by the pleasure. Perfect our virtue, perfect our discernment, develop expansive attitudes in the mind. These are the things we can bring to the present moment. These are the skills that we can carry with us. So don't be afraid of being attached to them. This is another problem of reading too much. We're afraid of being attached to concentration. But, as Ajahn Fuang said, if you're not crazy about your concentration, you're not going to get good at it. We're working on a skill here, so you really want to be attached to mastering the skill. Attached properly in the sense that you take a mature attitude toward it. But don't be afraid of being attached. You can work on removing your attachment to concentration later, after you've used the concentration to pry away your attachments to other things. Think of Ajahn Chah's example of the banana. You're coming back from the market carrying a banana. Someone comes up and asks you, "What are you going to do with the banana?" You say, "I'm going to eat it." How about the peel? Are you going to eat that too? Then Ajahn Chah asks, with what are you going to answer them? His answer is twofold. First, he says, you answer them with desire. In other words, the discernment that allows you to come up with a good answer is based on desire. You want to give a good answer. And the answer, of course, is that the time hasn't come to throw the peel away. If you throw the peel away now, the banana turns into mush in your hands, and you never get to eat it. So there are some things that you have to hold on to. When they've done their duty, then you can throw them away. So these skills that we're working on, the skills of the Brahma Viharas, virtue, discernment, mastering the arts of concentration so that pain doesn't overcome us and pleasure doesn't overcome us. Hold on to these skills. Work at them again and again and again. Learn how to master them. In this way, you find that you're more and more free in the present moment to do what's skillful, to be a free agent, and to actually make a difference right here, right now. The rivers of karma. When you're meditating, you're engaging in a form of karma, which the Buddha identified with intention. The intention here is to stay with the breath, to try to be fully aware of the breath element in the body, throughout the whole body. You want to maintain that intention in the face of all the other intentions that are going to come up in the course of the hour. It's to be expected. Vagrant thoughts will come into the mind about tomorrow, about today, yesterday. And you've got to realize that those thoughts are not in line with the original intention. No matter how useful or important they may seem, they're not what you want right now. You're trying to be very clear about what your intention is right now and how to stick with it, because this is really all you've got, your present intention. Think about times when you're ill, when difficult situations come up in life, and you look around and there seems to be no means of escape. Actually, though, there is an escape. Your one escape will be the intentions in your mind at that time. Say that there's a pain coming up. You're ill, and no matter what painkiller the doctors give you, there's still pain. How are you going to deal with it? Your best way of dealing with it has to do with your intention. Remind yourself that if you think about how long you've been in pain, or how much longer you're going to be in pain, that's going to weigh the mind down unnecessarily. You want to simply be aware of the sensation of the pain right now, without all those other narratives. As for the questions of why there's pain, and whether it's just, or how frustrated you may feel about it, you've got to learn how to put those aside as well. In other words, as you're sitting here meditating, putting aside random thoughts, you're getting practice for a skill you're really going to need as aging, illness, and death come closing in. As the Buddha said, there are two ways of developing qualities of mind that are really helpful in cases like that. One is to learn how to develop unlimited goodwill for all beings, yourself included, and the people around you. He says, when the mind has that unlimited quality, it's like a huge river. Someone may come along and try to make the river stop, but they can't make the river stop because the river is so large. They can try to make the river be without water. They'll try to dump it out with pails, but they can't do that because there is so much water in the river. Even if you put a lump of salt in the river, you can still drink the water because there is so much more water in the river. As you're able to maintain that unlimited state of mind, the issues that come up with pain and illness, or as death approaches, will seem a lot smaller than if your mind is limited and concerned only with the narratives that you've been carrying around all the time. This is another way in which meditation is good for you. You learn how to step out of those narratives. When aging, illness, and death come, you see it as an opportunity to handle them skillfully. Because part of that unlimited frame of mind reminds you that everybody goes through these things. You're not being singled out. This is a universal process. That helps take some of the sting away. The other skills you need, as the Buddha said, are learning how to keep the mind from being overcome by pain and being overcome by pleasure. And again, these are among the skills you learn as you're meditating. Pain comes up in the body, and you learn the appropriate ways of dealing with it. In some cases, that means focusing on another part of the body that's not in pain to give the mind a sense of safe haven here in the present moment. When it has developed a sense of strength, the sense of well-being that can come from that sense of have, then you can start looking into the pain. To what extent is the pain affected by the way you breathe? To what extent is it affected by your concepts about the pain? If you regard the experience of pain as a total given, it's hard to get away from it. But if you realize you're involved in constructing the pain, your concept of it is going to have an actual effect on how you experience it. The mind is built in this way. You've got all these pain receptors in your body, along with the various parts of your nervous system that make the decision as to which little pains you're going to pay attention to and which ones you're going to ignore. Most of this happens on a subconscious level, but as you meditate, you train yourself to become more conscious of it. You learn how to take that ability to focus and ignore and use it deliberately for the purpose of keeping the mind from suffering. This is a skill we learn as we meditate. At the same time, we learn how not to be overcome by pleasure. First, there are sensual pleasures, which we tend to go running to as our main escape from pain. And as long as we see them as our only escape, we don't like to look at their negative side. But it's an important skill in the meditation. If you really want the mind to settle down and gain good, solid concentration to develop insight, you've got to learn how to look at the downside of sensual pleasures, how unreliable they are, and how they make you do all kinds of stupid things, or how you make yourself do stupid things just to keep them going. But to really let go of these pleasures requires more than just seeing their drawbacks. It also requires that you find an alternative pleasure. That's the pleasure that comes from keeping the mind still. As the Buddha said, there's no true pleasure aside from peace. So you look for your pleasure, for your happiness in the mind at peace, allowing it to be still, allowing it to be centered, and learning how to maintain it. That stillness, that sense of being centered, regardless of what comes up. Some of your first practice in this is when you finally settle down and the breath is calm. It feels refreshing. When that happens, it's very easy to lose your focus on the breath and move over to the sense of pleasure. It's like falling into a hole. You're skating on ice, and all of a sudden, you skate off to where it's too thin and fall through the ice into water. In other words, you've abandoned the cause because you've gotten so infatuated with the effect. But if you can realize that the effect is still there, the pleasure is still there in the body, and you don't have to go rushing after it, you don't have to go gobbling it down, it will still have its good effects on the body and its good effects on the mind, even as you stay focused on the breath. You see it as not something that you're going to jump on, but simply as a sign that the mind is beginning to settle down. You're beginning to see results in the meditation. It's like a sign on the road. When you pass a sign that says you're entering such and such a town, or there's a town X number of miles ahead, You don't leave the road to drive on the sign. You stay on the road. In the same way, you stay with the breath. In this way, you learn how to use the pleasure of concentration without being overwhelmed by it. Now, it's not that you're afraid of the pleasure of concentration. I don't know many times you hear the topic of jhana or concentration introduced, and almost the first thing they say, before they've even told you what it is, they tell you it's dangerous. That's a really perverse approach. Right concentration is not dangerous in that way. It helps separate you from the dangers of being sucked in by sensual pleasures. It provides you with an alternative to sensual pleasures. As the Buddha points out, there's no abandoning our attachment for sensual pleasures until we can develop the sense of ease that comes from getting the mind still, centered, solidly based in the present. This is how you teach the mind not to be overcome by pleasure or pain. Pain becomes a tool, an opportunity to learn about how the mind creates unnecessary suffering for itself around the pain. Pleasure, too, becomes a tool, part of the path. You don't want to see pleasure and pain as things to run away from or to run toward, but as tools you can use to give the mind more and more freedom. That way, if the body begins to wear down and the rest of your life begins to unravel, you don't lose your bearings. You realize that your happiness isn't based on a particular narrative. It doesn't have to be based on the body. It has a deeper foundation inside. And whatever the results of past bad actions you've done, if you develop these tools of having a sense of limitlessness in the mind, limitless goodwill, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity, and a proper understanding of pleasure and pain, so you are not overcome by them, you'll have your escape. These are precisely the tools we learn as we meditate, teaching the mind to stay with the breath, and then using the breath as a tool for gaining greater and greater understanding. This is why when the Buddha explains issues of karma, he doesn't use mechanical images. His images are all fluid. We all have unskillful decisions, unskillful intentions that we've acted on in the past, but it doesn't mean we have to suffer from them. They will have their effects, but their effects are going to be mitigated or amplified by your present karma. It's as if we have two rivers coming together. If you've ever been at the spot where the little Colorado joins the Colorado, you see two very different kinds of water. The little Colorado is very muddy. The Colorado is clear. And right at the spot where they join, it's a mixture of the two. But as you go downstream, the muddiness disappears and the water is all clear. That's because the Colorado is bigger than the little Colorado. The muddiness is overcome by the clarity of the water, the larger river. This is what you want to do in your meditation. You want to make sure that your present karma is a bigger river of clear water. It'll take care of the silt that comes in from the little river if you develop the skills that can keep your present intentions clear and in focus. So this is our opportunity right here as we meditate, to keep this river of present karma as clear and as large as possible.